Oh, and by the way, we can still do things like cross wires. So here's a set of cells in the songline processor. And we could have a signal traveling like this from left to right. And we could still take a signal from this K side and send it into here, bring this down here, and this can go into this side because we have data flowing in both directions, and that can cut across and come through the K side and come out here. And so we have this point connected to this point, and we have this point connected to this point. So we can still cross over and not box ourselves too painfully into a corner where we can't transmit signals. You have all the usual routing issues to deal with planar routing, but it's not necessarily more restrictive than four-sided cells. All right, so let's look at the following function. So here's a cell, here's another cell, here's a third. I'm going to take an input over here. I'm just going to call this in. And this is going to come into here. And this is going to be an input that I call load. And that's going to get routed into the southern input on here. All right, let me talk about this function separately. This cell, the second cell over here, is going to route its left input back to its left output. So what does this cell here do? It does the following. It says write equals, and it can be one of two things, based on the value coming into the K line. So if K is less than 2.5, or K is bigger than 2.5. So if K is bigger than 2.5, the output to the right is just going to be whatever's coming in on the left. And if K is less than 2.5, the output to the right is going to be whatever's coming in on the right. And we're also going to take this value and send it out to its K side, and we'll call this Q. All right, what have we done? We've just built a simple D flip-flop. So when the load line is low, this input is 0 volts. This input down here is 0 volts. This function is simply taking whatever's coming from the right and sending it back to the right. Whatever value you have stored here, whatever value you're seeing on Q, you're going to continue to see, and changing the input has no effect. But when the load line goes high enough, when load is bigger than 2.5, this changes behavior, and now the output to the right is whatever is coming in on the left. And at that point, whatever value you set on the input, you see coming out on the Q output. And when you drop the load line again below 2.5 volts, that last value you saw will now get recirculated back by this, and will be trapped between these two cells. So it acts like a D flip-flop, but it's actually more like a sample and hold. When this input gets sufficiently high, the input line here gets loaded into this memory circuit. And when the load line drops, the value coming in at the point when the load line drops below 2.5, that value is stored in here. So it holds that input value until you raise this input again, which says read another sample. And while you're reading a sample, the Q output tracks your input. So it's like an analog flip-flop, which is an interesting notion. We can do lots of things with that. Let's go ahead and look at what the code would look like for this, and we'll talk more about code when we go into the simulation tools in another set of videos. But let's take a quick look at how we might code this up, and then we'll go from there and talk about C mode.